Alright, so now we're going to get started with our 5th unit. And Unit 5 is all about sort of the causes and leading up to the Civil War. So that's why this unit isn't very long. It pretty much just covers the 10 years right before the Civil War breaks out. So we're just going to be discussing all of the sort of immediate causes and how we eventually get to secession and Civil War. So this unit goes from 1850 to 1860. 1860 is when the Civil War breaks out. So that's why the title of this unit is The Great Divide. We're going to be seeing the North and the South, which are already two very different places, separating even more and really becoming totally divided. So obviously one of the major issues the major issue at the center of the Civil War and the lead up to the Civil War is slavery. So let's talk some more about slavery. We've talked a great deal about slavery because it's a huge part of our history, especially for the first 150 years or so of American history. So in 1790, more than 90% of all of the slaves in the United States lived below the Mason-Dixon Line. So the Mason-Dixon Line is essentially this sort of invisible line that we draw that goes between the North and the South. It cuts right above Maryland and cuts the two of us apart. So when I throw that stat out there, 1790, more than 90% of all slaves live in the South, that's an important figure because it's not just that we know that there have always been slaves. There have been slaves in every single state in the Union at one time or another, but this is a whole other monster, right? Most of the slaves have always been in the South because the South is where the agriculture has always been. So there has always been this constant debate going on between property rights and human rights. What reigns supreme here? So if you remember back in the Missouri Compromise that we talked about last unit, in Unit 4, the slavery and the expansion of slavery came up, right? The question was, are we going to add slave states to the Union or free states to the Union? So Henry Clay wrote the Missouri Compromise in 1820 and banned slavery in pretty much the majority of the northern part of the Louisiana Purchase. So remember, we were looking at the map, and slavery is essentially locked in, and that's one reason why we thought the people in the South would want to expand west. Well, they've expanded west now, right? We've gained the Mexican Concession and the Gadsden Purchase, so now the continental United States looks like what it does today. And the question that we're going to start seeing more questions coming up about now that we're settling that Louisiana Purchase land finally with westward expansion, and we're getting more people into this new land that we own, where is slavery going to expand or is it not? So obviously the majority of slaves by this time live on plantations. So let's talk about plantations a little bit. So cotton accounts for 2/3 of all slaves from North Carolina to Texas. From North Carolina to Texas, 2/3 of all those slaves are on a cotton plantation. But aside from cotton plantations, we've got tobacco plantations in Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina were early on where tobacco was. If you remember, that's because Jamestown started with tobacco, right in Virginia, and that spread north and south. So it was in that region, but as the years went on, it spread further west. So we even see tobacco plantations in Missouri, Tennessee, and Kentucky. If you look a little further south, we see rice plantations. It takes a lot of water to grow rice. So you primarily see rice plantations in like swampy coastal places, so southern coastal North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, and then also along the Mississippi River in Louisiana, we see lots of rice plantations. The fourth type of plantation we see a lot of is sugar. Sugar plantations are mostly in Louisiana, it takes a lot of money to start a sugar plantation. They're a huge investment, so they're pretty rare. And then the last type of plantation, the fifth type, is hemp. So we see a fair amount of hemp plantations, actually not necessarily in the old or deep South, a little further west in Kentucky and Missouri. They're the smallest number, and they require the smallest number of slaves, but we do see some hemp plantations in the United States around this time. So the issue of slavery got brought back up, the expansion of slavery. What are we going to do when we gained the Mexican cession? And the question was, what are we going to do now? Are we going to allow slavery there? Because technically all that land is below the Missouri Compromise line, but, a lot of people don't want to allow slavery to expand. So, in August 6th of 1846, a guy named David Wilmot puts on the floor of Congress. He puts up this proposal called the Wilmot Proviso, and the Wilmot Proviso proposes to ban slavery in all of that new land that we get from Mexico, and the South flips out. I mean, they absolutely lose their minds. How dare you? You're violating the agreement. We said we would allow slavery to expand into these places, and they just absolutely lose their minds, and they start threatening secession all over again. So it's a nullification crisis all over again. Congressmen are screaming at each other in the hall to meet each other on the dueling field, which is sort of like the 1846 version of let's take this outside. So it actually passes in the House, a vote of 80-64, but is killed in the Senate because, the South has a more equal representation in the Senate than they do in the House. And we're going to see what happens with the Wilmot Proviso happen over and over and over again. Many, many bills are going to come up in Congress that will either propose, ending slavery, expanding slavery, a combination of the two, and they will constantly be crushed by either the North or the South, or a combination of the both. And that's where we get a phrase to describe slavery. It's called someone once referred to in Congress, they referred to slavery as a peculiar institution. And that name really stuck with slavery after that. So if you're ever reading a primary document, or, if you read something about that on a test, a reference to something being a peculiar institution, they're talking about slavery. So now we've got all this land from Mexico, right? We've got the Mexican cession. What are we going to do with it? So we want to make these places states very quickly. Specifically, President Zachary Taylor wants to make them into states pretty fast, especially California and New Mexico. So this once again pits the North and the South against each other. Are they going to be slave? Are they going to be free? Are they going to be either or both? Who knows? So when they're talking about this a representative, a congressman from Georgia named Robert Toombs, you don't need to remember him, but he gets up in front of Congress and he gives this huge speech, and he says, I avow before this house and country and in the presence of the living God that if by your legislation you seek to drive us, he's speaking about the South, if you seek to drive us from the territories of California and Mexico, thereby attempting to fix a national degradation upon the states of this Confederacy, I am for disunion, and I will devote all I am and all I have on this earth to its consummation. And what he's saying is, if what you're trying to do is stop the South from expanding its power into the West, and if you're trying to stop slavery from expanding to hurt the South, then I am going to devote every single thing I have in my life and being to pulling the South out of the United States and separating ourselves from the Union. So at this point, the South is threatening secession over everything. It's sort of like the boy who cried wolf now. And once again, this results in an all-out brawl. There is a straight up fight in Congress when Robert Toombs gives this speech. They said it was like a bomb had exploded in the hall. There was like nothing that had ever been that crazy in there. So once again, we face the problem of secession and civil war and who is the only man that can ever save us from ourselves? Obviously, Henry Clay. So on January 29th of 1850, Henry Clay comes to the rescue again and proposes a series of resolutions to appease both the North and the South. And so if you want, while you're taking notes on this part, kind of keep score as we go through this. What he writes is the Compromise of 1850. And you can sort of see he's kind of trying to tally points, a point for the North, a point for the South in this compromise. So the first thing, California will be admitted as a free state. Boom, point for the North. New Mexico and Utah, this is 2 and 3, New Mexico and Utah will both be admitted to the Union as territories with popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty is the idea, we'll talk about popular sovereignty more in the future, but popular sovereignty is the idea that the people who live in that territory will get to vote themselves and decide on whether or not they will have slaves. So the Congress is not going to tell Utah and New Mexico if they're going to have slaves. We're going to let the people in Utah and New Mexico just figure it out on their own. So California is going to be a free state, point for the North. New Mexico is going to be popular sovereignty. That's no point for anyone because it could go either way. Utah is going to be popular sovereignty, point for no one because it could go either way. So number 4, we're going to pass a new Fugitive Slave Law. Boom, point for the South. So this Fugitive Slave Law we'll talk more about in a minute, and it is just a lot stricter of a Fugitive Slave Law. It's closing a lot of the loopholes that we saw in the old one. Point number 5 in the Compromise of 1850, we're going to outlaw slaves in D.C. So the slave trade will end in the capital. That's a point for the North. And that's really symbolic. For slavery to be illegal in your nation's capital, it really sends the message that you are generally an anti-slavery country. And then the last piece, number 6, Congress is not allowed to interfere anymore with the interstate slave trade, meaning the trade and marketing of slaves from one state to another. Congress can no longer interfere with it. That is a big point for the South. So we've got 2 points for the North, being California with no slavery and D.C. with no slavery. And they've got 2 points for the South, having, Congress can't interfere with the slave trade and the new Fugitive Slave Law. And then we've got 2 neutral points, being Mexico and Utah as using popular sovereignty. Now, Daniel Webster, if you remember him from the last unit, Daniel Webster gets up in Congress and he gives this really intense speech saying that he's not speaking as a Massachusetts man or a Northern man, but as an American. And as an American, this is something that we have to get behind. We have to be down for this. John C. Calhoun, if you remember him, John C. Calhoun was the guy that looked like the Muppet Eagle, the old vice president. John C. Calhoun is dying, okay? He's on his deathbed, but he still has things to say about the Compromise of 1850, so he has someone write it all down and read his speech out loud to Congress because he's so close to dying. And he basically is like, so we wouldn't need this bill if it wasn't for the North. Literally everything is the North's fault, and everything about the North sucks, and I don't like the fact that it exists. And in the end, he essentially says disunion is the only alternative left to us. Secession is the only option left, and then he dies. So that's the last we hear from John C. Calhoun. So you see that the North is really pushing for us to accept the good parts of this, and the South is like, maybe parts of it are okay, but as a whole, we're still not very happy. So now comes the task of getting it through Congress. We've got to get it passed. So the first thing they do is they put it all up, all parts of it. Now, I gave you 6 pieces. There are actually 8 pieces to it. You don't need to know all 8. You just need to know those 6. But they put all 8 pieces in one bill, and they call it the Omnibus Bill. And they try to vote on it as one single package. So, everyone will have to either vote yes to the whole thing or no to the whole thing. No picking and choosing what you like and what you don't like. Either you like the whole thing or you don't like it. Well, ends up being a horrible plan. That doesn't work, and it gets voted down because there's the things that they don't like. They don't like them so much that they just vote the whole thing down. So This guy here on the right, Stephen Douglas, he is a mastermind of getting things through Congress, and he arranges to bring every single one of these pieces up to a vote separately. This allows for a majority on each measure. You know, there's enough states that like this one piece, and then enough states that like this one piece, sort of as a jigsaw puzzle. So he manages to get everything passed and through Congress in August and September, and finally in 1850, President Millard Fillmore signs the Compromise of 1850 into law.